Okay, questions? Right, it's going to be fun. No, seriously, it should be fun. It should be, yeah, as I say, an opportunity for you to try something new. Okay? Right, well, I'm sure there'll be more questions at the end, so you can come back to me. Right, some things to think about. In terms of the subject matter, you know, we're all incredibly bright, intelligent people, but don't kind of go too far down in your discipline that requires us to know a lot of discipline knowledge, because the whole thing might fail. So try to keep it, you know, reasonably, unless it's a concept that you can learn very quickly. We did this in Kazakhstan, and my colleague who is from the social sciences was doing it with me. And we were being taught some kind of electronic engineering concepts, and they were using Kahoot. And she came top of the class just by guessing all the answers, so which kind of really illustrated the challenges of Kahoot. But anyway, so think about how deep into your discipline you want to go, so it doesn't stop engagement basically. The timing is 6 minutes total, and as I say, use the session to practice any new elements of your teaching. That could be using technology, it could be questioning techniques, it could be facilitating group discussions, what have you. Okay? I'll put all of these slides up tonight. So, well, actually, this one's already up there, so you can review these. So after the session, we're working in groups of 4 to get feedback. Okay? So before we start, you'll know the other 3 people that you're giving feedback to. So after we've done all the teaching, we'll then have another session where you just work in small groups on your own, whether in here, whether in the other room, and give each other feedback. And I think it's important from that is that you think about the feedback that you're getting. Make sure it's constructive. Think about the language that you use. You know, think about how you could help them do better. You know, but don't be directive about telling people what to do. Okay. So any questions about that?
Are we going to write our review formally?
It's up to you. It's up to you. I'll give you some sort of pointers, and then you can just write them and then share them in the group. I will fill out a pro forma for each of you.
Okay. So formally, we will not meet them in the application process.
No. It's just a matter. It's just getting you used to how you give and receive feedback, because you didn't do that as part of because you didn't have a chance to do peer review over the summer. Okay, right, so that moves us on to the final piece of what we're doing today. And it's kind of moving on, the idea of scholarship. So we've sort of talked about reflecting on our own practice, and that kind of internal kind of dialogue loop, thinking about what we're doing well. We're thinking about now taking that to the next step, and thinking about moving on to the sort of scholarship of teaching and learning, how our practice is informed by the literature and how we ourselves output what we're doing into the literature. So it's taking it to that next level. What we're doing in terms of reflection should be informed by the literature, should be informed by practice, but now we're going, well, actually, let's make that a little bit more of a two-way street. So what evidence informs your current teaching practice? Okay, that has to be at the heart of your fellowship application. What tells you what's good practice in teaching and learning? Okay, so I've been talking for the last 3 weeks with you about active learning. What's the evidence for that? Is it just me telling you my mad ideas, or is there some real evidence for it? Is the evidence coming from your own experiences? Is it coming from the literature? Is it coming from other professional development courses? We've been discussing your challenges a lot, so we're not going to sort of really reiterate that, but we're going to try and work in teams, and I would quite like you to try and work in interdisciplinary teams rather than sort of cluster in your own disciplines. To think about how you would evaluate alternative approaches to changing practice. think about methods for evaluating the impact of change. So we've talked a lot about change, okay, and we've talked about the motivators for change. Now we're going to start thinking about how do we actually evaluate that, okay? So we can think back to the instruments we were talking about yesterday, whether it's module evaluations and things like that. But are there more kind of direct things that we want to measure? And then we're going to consider the ethical issues that arise if you're going to do scholarship activities or pedagogic research. Okay. So does the university here have an ethical review body? If you're doing none. Even if you're doing a research, where's the dentist? Presumably you have an ethical review body if you're doing research with patients.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Right. Okay, well we'll talk a little bit about ethics in a kind of more abstract way. And then we'll think about how your scholarship activity is supporting your fellowship and how it kind of maps across. Okay. So some of this stuff we've already covered. So this is just questions for you. So thinking about how you teach, how far is it informed by your own learning experience, your institution or colleagues or discipline colleagues, institutional policies or PSRB requirements, or pedagogic evidence. Okay, so which one of those, anybody like to comment, which one of those do you think is the biggest driver in terms of how you actually are doing your teaching?
Institutional policies, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you talked about that earlier where they were changing policies and having to change the way that you do things. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Mostly my own experience.
Your own experiences, yeah. So it's that kind of that idea of what works and what works for you. Anybody else got anything else? Does anybody work with their discipline colleagues outside the institution to think about how they teach?
Yeah, we're discussing because I have some peers, exactly, my PhD colleagues, PhD friends. So we're discussing. They're in the same discipline, so it's really helpful.
Yeah.
We're looking at how things run in other institutions.
Yeah.
What's similar, what's different. I think it's a good learning.
Yeah, and I think your people are experiencing the same problems as yourself, but different university, what have you, and it's really nice because they maybe have different policies that they're constrained by, but that's caused them to do something different. So it can be really useful. So I organise a conference for people who teach science, technology, engineering and maths. So it's all those disciplines come together and we share practice. And then leading on from that, we actually are forming online communities where we can share practice and problems and ideas. And that's definitely, especially with the growth of online communities, that's becoming really helpful, getting ideas and sharing practice. Anybody else self-informed by any of these? Does anybody read the pedagogic literature?
Unfortunately, maybe this is our national witness, because in Turkey, only the academics working in the Faculty of Educational Sciences are busy with these issues.
Yeah.
When, for example, when I come together with my colleagues, we never talk about our teaching strategies.
Yeah.
We talk about the recent theories in literature, maybe, but never about recent pedagogical approaches.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that's just a Turkey problem. I think that is a global problem. It's growing now in the UK, Australia, places like that, where the scholarship and pedagogic research community is growing, and people that are basically teaching in the disciplines but are interested in the scholarship of their disciplines. Those communities are growing, but I don't think they would go and read publications that are produced by the Faculty of Education necessarily. They're just like the ones that are the papers that are produced, by other biologists, by other engineers, about how you teach biology or engineering. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I just have a question. Okay. Could you recommend us an educational conference that we should follow?
There's the HA conference.
HA.
That goes on in July, which is very useful. They don't broadcast very much of it. I mean, some conferences, I was kind of virtually attending a conference last week before I came here of Association of Learning Technologists, which is a UK-based, but it's very much about how you use technology in education. But they live streamed a whole load of their keynotes and different presentations, and that was great. You know, you could join it. So I was joining in the conversations using Twitter, and it kind of, you know, it was well, not quite like being there, but you certainly got the key points, and you could get up and make a cup of coffee whenever it got a bit boring. but yeah, I can certainly add some stuff to the virtual learning environments and different conferences. But there's the European Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Conference as well, which is another annual one.
Do they publish the
Proceedings?
Proceedings.
Yeah.
I can't help asking this because at the end of the day, our institution, yes, they pay for our trip, but at the end they want to see a complete proof.
Yes, yeah. You have to present at the conference and things like that. Yeah, I mean, the HEA publish the proceedings for their conference, but they also put a lot of their papers are on what we call the Knowledge Hub on the HEA website, so you can see a lot of the papers and discussions on there. It's not the easiest thing to navigate. They're kind of changing the navigation of it to make it easier, but who knows? They've been saying that for a few years. So. Anybody else want to comment on any of those things about what's informing their practice? So again, when you're writing your fellowship application, if you're saying, as I said before, what you're doing is informed by one of these, okay? And you need to be reiterating that, okay? Not just describing what you've done, but how did you decide what it was that you were doing? Which of these was informing it? Okay, so what's meant by scholarship and pedagogic research? So I've used these as kind of like a composite term a few times, but there are distinct differences. So we've already talked about reflection. We've spent a lot of time talking about reflection, and reflection is very much, you know, designed to inform yourself. Okay, so it's very much inward-looking, and it's only verified by yourself. Okay, so if you're evaluating your teaching and having a self-reflection, you know, there's no external influences on that, as we discussed this morning. So you're the only person that says that this was a good thing or a bad thing, or what have you. Okay, and you know, it results in personal knowledge, which is a good thing, but it's limited in as far as it goes. When we move on to scholarship, this tends to have a wider impact. Okay, so you're starting to reach out to maybe others in your discipline, or others in your school or your institution. Okay, so it's verified by those in the group. So you know, if you have a peer-reviewed paper or poster at a conference talking about how you know teach biology using problem-based learning, if that poster is accepted, that paper is accepted by the group, people you know refer to it and say, oh yes, I've used your work, etc. So you start to get that validation, okay, by the discipline group or perhaps by your school or your institution. So when I was looking at some of your reflective accounts, you say, okay, I've introduced using rubrics for assessment across my course team. That's being validated by your course team, by your school. Other people in your school are now using the technique that you introduced, okay? So that's validating what it is that you're doing, yeah? And it results in local knowledge. So it's very much like what works here, okay? So if I want to teach dentists at Bay Kent and I'm using this technique, you know, and all the other dentists at Bay Kent say, yeah, that's really effective. But it might not work at University College, or it might not work in Nazarbayev, or it might not work in Pakistan. You know, it's what's working here with our group of students and the specific intake that we have, okay? Once we get to research, it's informing the wider community. It is the key difference between sort of scholarship and research is that it has this outside verification. It's generalizable knowledge beyond the group, okay? So this is not just what works at Bay Kent with this group of students. This works with dentists anywhere in the world. This works with biologists anywhere in the world, yeah?